What's up, everybody? I'm Tim Metz, and welcome to the Jazz Drummers Blueprint Podcast, Cymbal Makers Edition. On today's episode, we're speaking with Manny Skretas from Skretas Family Cymbals out of San Antonio, Texas. And we talk about his cymbal making process, his influences, some cymbals. I have one of his right over my right shoulder over here. It's amazing. We're going to be talking about all that stuff, so I hope you enjoy this journey. As always, these podcasts are brought to you by the Jazz Drummers Blueprint, which is my year-long mentorship program. It's designed to help you get better at playing the drums no matter what the style of music. If you are somebody that's out there lost, kind of trying to figure out how to get better and don't know where to go, this is for you. Give me a call, hit the chat button thing, but hit the link below, the Jazz Drummers Blueprint, and schedule a call with me. It's free. We'll see if we're a good fit, see if you're for each other, and we'll make it happen. All right, on to the podcast. All right, well, we're joined by Manny, owner and maker, cymbal maker extraordinaire from Skretas Family Cymbals in San Antonio, right, Manny? Is that where you are?
Yeah, just north of San Antonio in New Braunfels, about half an hour north of San Antonio.
Awesome. Well, hey, man, you made a killing cymbal, and I wanted to talk to you about it.
Thank you, man. I'm so glad you like it.
Actually, you're making a lot of killing cymbals. That's the truth. Can you talk about how you got started doing this and a little bit of your background?
Yeah. Well, I was born and raised in Canada, which a lot of people probably know at this time. But I used to work at Long and McQuaid, which is Canada's main kind of franchise of music stores. And that's how I kind of got into the drums and kind of got obsessed with cymbals at that time, just being around them all the time and in the stores and getting to do some ordering later in my career at that point. So was working there, everything was going well, and then COVID hit. So all the stores shut down just for curbside pickup. So we didn't have people in the stores all the time. We were just kind of answering the phones and doing curbside pickup. So I had a lot of time just to kind of walk around and test out a bunch of cymbals. I would put two kind of similar ones right up against each other, maybe two K-cons of different types or something like that, and kind of look at the profiles and tap on them. And that was kind of the beginning of my research of seeing how these things differ from each other, when to the untrained eye, they kind of look really similar. So I was trying to dig deep. And then at that point, it was all about just building up the courage to swing a hammer at a cymbal for the very first time. And that's kind of where it took off. I just started doing some modifications of cheap, those Pearl CX kind of brass cymbals at home. I would find those for cheap or for free online, or sometimes we had them in the store because we would rent out drum kits, but you can't give those cymbals for rentals because they're too brittle. They just break. So we had a whole stack of them in the back, and I just asked my manager, hey, can I take these? And luckily I was able to. So that kind of is where that started with the modifications. I started doing some repairs for some friends, which were complete hack jobs, but luckily we learned pretty quickly from that point when I repaired something for a friend, and then he brought it back a couple weeks later, and it had cracked at that same point. So it kind of forced me to push forward. But at the end of the day, it was just kind of this obsession with cymbals that built from being around them all day and watching videos of the Sabian artisans and that Bosphorus video making the master series that everybody watches. And then when we moved to Texas, I just thought, hey, we should just turn it into a business, and here we are. It's been almost 2 years.
Wow, congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you, man. Thanks, man.
What an interesting space. Like, when I was a kid, I never even thought that being an independent cymbal maker would be could be a job, and
yeah.
It's booming. It's amazing. It's really great. So
yeah, it's really I think it's a great thing it's just good for business to have different competition, different avenues of all kinds. So it makes sure that everybody can get exactly what they need.
Nice. And you're primarily a jazz drummer. Can you talk a little bit about like your drumming history? And because
sure,
every time I hear you demo the cymbals, I'm like, this guy can play. So.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. I started. I didn't actually have my own drum kit until I was like 22, and I just turned 30 now. So it's been just 7 or 8 years that I've actually had my own drum kit. And before that, I was in a couple bands. I used to sing when I was younger, so I was in a couple bands. And that was kind of my main thing. But I always really liked playing the drums. And my parents, probably rightfully, were like, "No, we're not having a drum kit. You can just wait till you're older and get one when you want one." But I'm lucky that I did that, because I came to the drums after I came to jazz as a style of music. So I saw, I saw some old concert clips and stuff like that. I was watching the like Jazz at Lincoln Center concerts that they would do at like Dizzy's Club and stuff like that, and that really got me into playing jazz, because it's not like other kinds of music. When you're playing jazz, I think it really helps to watch performances as well as listen to the music, because sometimes it can be too complicated to just listen to a record and having no background in playing the drums at all to figure out what's going on. So having YouTube and watching those concerts was a really big thing. And I really wanted to just kind of expand my knowledge. And I was in kind of a pop, rock, blues kind of band at the time. And I started really pushing to infuse jazz into that, because that's what I was kind of learning how to play. And I brought myself, and I bought myself a pair of brushes before I even had a drum kit in the house. Because I was buying a drum kit for my cousin, and I was like, all right, this, like, I want to make sure that I can start as authentically as possible. So I bought brushes, started practicing on some surfaces, like some books and stuff like that, and my mom's kitchen counter. Yeah. And then from that point, I just kind of sat there all day. I was in school at that time, but then I quit to pursue music, and that may have not been the best decision at that time, but now here we are. So I guess everything worked out. But that's kind of it. It's not really a super interesting story. I just kind of started a little later in life, and then I was working in a music store, so I could practice at work, I could practice at home. So I just kind of threw myself into it.
Great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Really cool. So what kind of, obviously kind of your jazz background kind of led to the types of cymbals that you ended up making, right? So yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your cymbal making influences and where all that kind of comes from?
Well, I always liked, the first cymbal that I had that really opened my eyes to think like, wow, this is everything that a cymbal could be. Like, it's unbelievable. Was when I came back from my honeymoon with my wife, and we stopped at a little drum shop just north of Toronto. I'm trying to remember that. I think it was called Drummer's Hangout, something like that. But he had an Istanbul Mehmet 22-inch Legend Dry ride, the one with those big, huge divots in it. And I tapped on that cymbal, and I was completely blown away. So I bought it, and that kind of was the first cymbal that I bought that was like, wow, this is what a handmade cymbal can sound like. There's so many colors in it. There's all these kinds of textures, and when you play it with brushes, when you play it with different sticks, all these things come alive. So that was kind of the first push into my research of kind of buying and selling cymbals really regularly, to kind of get my hands on as many different sounds and learn how they interacted based on their builds and all that stuff. And then when I started doing a lot more research on Instagram, I found Dr. Eric Binder, who we all love. And just hearing his old Ks and old As and those kind of cymbals like that, I was like, so this is like, these are what those jazz greats that I love played. So I should probably get my hands on some of those and see. And that was kind of the thing that pushed it forward, because I loved the patinas, I loved the high profiles and the thin cymbals. I didn't understand how thin cymbals could have such a strong stick definition at that time. So we started looking into how the metal ages and all that stuff. I can actually show you if you want. The very first old K that I got from Dr. Binder, it was this. Sorry, I got the dogs. I'm all over the place right now.
Oh, that's apologize.
Right. But this is a 18-inch new stamp.
Okay.
And it is 1149 grams. So it's really, really paper thin. It's got a
That
nice
umbrella. Yeah.
umbrella profile to it. And when I first tapped on that cymbal, the amount of smoke that it had to it, and it was just a really well balanced kind of for a small ride. It had so much body to it, and that's kind of the main thing that I was trying to achieve from the very start with all my ride cymbals. Um, I was trying basically to make cymbals that had a lot of stick definition, but also a lot of body. I didn't want them to be too dry, even before I got the lathe, because I started hammering blanks before I had set up my lathe. So I had to try to find a way to make these cymbals as lively and as full sounding as possible while they still had that dry finish, the outer crust on them.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big learning experience for me. And then, you know, it kind of went from there. But I'm always saying that balance is key for me. I want a cymbal that really responds in whatever way you want it to. If you really want the cymbal to have a lot of stick definition, it's kind of like those pictures on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, where it's like, you know, change your mind to look at this and you'll see that. Or if you change your mind, you'll see a different word or a different color or something like that. So that's kind of what I wanted to achieve. I want the cymbal to be what you need it to be in that moment, just by a kind of change of mindset.
That's beautiful. And
If
so
that makes any sense.
so that's kind of like how your philosophy just behind your cymbal making then, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, pretty much. Whether I'm making, I've made some smaller kind of rock oriented crash cymbals for people, 17-inch, 18-inch crash cymbals. I've made some 24-inch rides that are super paper thin and stuff like that. And whatever I'm making, I have that same kind of mindset where I want this cymbal to be as full sounding and as versatile as possible. That's kind of it.
It's beautiful. So I mean, you totally accomplished that with the one that I bought. So here, let me grab it because it's actually on the stand right now.
Okay, nice.
I kind of just want to talk about it a little bit. So is this like a hand formed bell or?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was thinking because it's a very low bell. I don't know if you can see it very well, but the bell is fairly low. It's got a decent umbrella profile. It's got a weight balance, like it wants to be like this, you know. So it sits in the same spot like most cymbals do, and you know, it's got the old K lathing, kind of the pin lathing and everything that they used to do. It's a beautiful cymbal, and it sounds incredible. It almost sounds like a mini bell ride, in a way.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of people usually think of mini bells as kind of the size of the bell, you know, a 6-inch bell versus a 3-inch bell, and that is definitely part of it. But the height of a bell and the actual size of the cup, I think, has an even more of an effect on that kind of stick definition to wash ratio. And with those hand formed bell cymbals, I wanted to get kind of a flat ride ish attack underneath the more present wash with crashability as well. So again, that idea of balance between all these things when I have a certain thing in mind.
I would say that you nailed that because it does have flat ride qualities without being a flat ride, kind of like a lot like a mini bell would. But
awesome.
Yeah, and that's why when I first got it, I told you it was very well behaved, and it is a super well behaved cymbal. I can bring this thing out, and it doesn't get out of control no matter what you do. I'm not going to use it on big band gigs, but I am going to use it on pretty much. I have been using it on a lot of my small band gigs, and it's been delightful.
I love it. Thank you so much. And that was something that I had never heard that before you said it. A cymbal being well behaved, but that's something that I've kept in my mind too at this point. Like I don't want to. Even with really thin cymbals, I don't want them. I still want them when you're riding them to have the stick on top, and I want it to be, like you said, well behaved. That you don't want it to get too wild. Yeah. So that's. I'm glad that you said that. Really sparked something for me as well.
Well, it's fun, you know. It's like I want a cymbal that I can play without too much thinking about it. And I have a few that even my old Ks, you know, they kind of get away. They can get away from you, you know, as you're playing them. Like you gotta really control them. You know, you gotta rein them in, and through your playing, through your stick, through you know, just making sure that you're not doing too much. And I don't want that to distract from my music making. And so if I can make music and I'm inspired by the sounds that are coming back at me, as you know, I mean that's the biggest part. But if I'm inspired by that and I don't have to work hard to get that sound, even better. I went through this phase for a long time where I didn't care. I wanted give me the most unruly cymbals and I'll make my touch work. And it's cool and I can do that. But I don't think I want to anymore.
Yeah, there comes a point where I guess there's a point where your ears and your playing kind of mature into a point where they converge, where you think, and then you find the perfect gear at that point. It's like, okay, this is what's comfortable for me to play with the sticks that I like, and it creates the sound that I want. Now, how can I find a cymbal that works perfectly with that way that I like to play? And we've all been through that phase. We're like, yeah, I want a 22-inch ride that's like 1,800 grams, and I want it to wobble like crazy. And those cymbals are really fun. But you really, like you said, you got to really watch how you're playing, and it can kind of take away from the music that you're making. I find myself just because I'm obsessed with cymbals, when I put some of my favorite cymbals up on the stands and I start playing, my eyes are just right there the whole time. And then my other limbs start to fall apart. And so it's good what you're saying to be able to get a cymbal that allows you to focus on the rest of what you're doing and really create the music, because the music is what we all do it for.
Man, I'm just so cymbal focused. Like when I'm playing, I'm really, my ride beat is everything. So I want to make sure that it's coming out and it's super clear. So I'm always just looking at the ride cymbal, like it's the soloist and the ride cymbal looking back and forth, But yeah, man, like this, you're doing it. This is a really killing cymbal. I'm very, 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 very pleased with it.
I appreciate it.
So you number them. This is number 138. Does that mean this is the 138th cymbal you ever made?
That one is actually the 139th, because I started at 0.
It started what?
I started at number 0. The serial number 0. So the main picture that's on my website is that serial number 0, and I think that I'm going to leave that picture there for the whole time, just kind of remember what it is. But yeah, so that cymbal it's always one number past what the serial number is.
Gotcha. I love that. And it looks like, your stamp is basically an engraver.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love it.
Just do it by hand with the Dremel. That's part of my, I guess, marketing, or the whole, my mantra, I guess, is what you want to call it. Every single step is hand done all the way up all the way up to the stamp.
Beautiful. I think that's amazing. What else do we need to know about your cymbals and everything? What other lines? I think, didn't you just introduce a new line as well?
Yes. Yeah. So I introduced the Dark series that just came out a couple weeks ago, I guess. And that one, the whole idea behind that series was basically just making a cymbal the way I normally would, but seeing how just changing the hammer would change how the cymbal sounds. So I usually use my my main kind of cymbal smithing hammer, the Nicholas Downing cymbal smith hammer, which has a flatter, kind of wider face to it, so it stretches the metal more evenly, and it doesn't really create these really deep pits unless you want it to. So what I did was used my finishing hammer, which is I just got it from Lowe's, and shaped the ball peen like this really heavy kind of traditional hammer. And I built the entire cymbal with that instead of I usually just do my overhammering with that, so you get these tight little hammer marks after lathing on the edge of the surface. So I made the entire cymbals with that, and I hammered a little bit harder and a little bit more spaced out. So I would get these big, Timothy Roberts calls it topography, which is the perfect, that's, the I guess, technical word for what it would be. I wanted there to be a lot of peaks and valleys, really complex sounding cymbals. And the more, you get a little bit of a brighter stick sound from that, and a little bit more projection, because the whole thing, I don't really know how it works. I think it's just the complexity that comes with it. You get a little bit of that high-end zing that helps with volume and helps to cut through the cymbals. And but it still has that balance that I was talking about before. And in the video that I released about it, my main goal with making that series was I wanted to make a cymbal set that was versatile but leans more towards jazz. I feel like most of the cymbal companies, the big cymbal companies out there, they're always talking about cymbals being versatile, but their main idea is to have them for rock and pop cymbals. Like they're these heavier, kind of brighter cymbals, that could work for jazz if you wanted them to. I wanted to do the same thing, but kind of flip it over. These are jazz cymbals, that are made for the jazz sounds, but they can work for rock and pop if you want them to. So that was kind of the main thing with that, and I was really happy with the way they sounded. So I decided to make a whole release video and make them available for pre-order and all that stuff. But they're really fun to make. I like using that heavy hammer. It really shapes the cymbal in a way that you have to be more careful with the shaping process. But you end up with the same kind of shape that I would make any of my other cymbals with. It's just it's a lot rougher of a surface. So you get more complexity. You get a much bigger, kind of deeper crash sound. And I was a fan. I liked it.
Awesome. No, I heard them on the video and they sounded incredible. So yeah,
Thanks.
no, it's really cool. So what are the lines of cymbals that you make besides the new one?
So yeah, there's the dark series there. I had a series called the Semi-Dry, which has since been discontinued. But Jerry at Hazelshire actually has the last one that I made because he loves the discontinued stuff. So I announced that they were discontinued, and then I sent him a message saying, hey, I had sent him a cymbal before, and I was thinking, hey, you want to restock anything? And he was like, well, you just talked about discontinuing that thing. Discontinue it, make one more, and then send it to me.
That's great.
So,
I love it.
he's a genius. So we did that, and that was the last one. Those ones were kind of the budget cymbal. They were in the $400 range, but it was just there's no decrease in quality for that. It was just because the build was a lot simpler. We just kind of hammered them up normally, and then only laid the bottom and straightened it out on top, and so they were kind of half laid cymbals, semi-dry. And those are still, if people see those and they want them, I still have my process of how to make them, and they're just not on the website anymore. So if anybody likes that and wants it, they can still just talk to me and I'll make it. But then I also have the Maritime series, which were the kind of super complex, heavily patinaed cymbals that I wanted them to sound and look like something that you found in an old kind of New England shipyard behind a pile of old ropes kind of thing. So they have this really kind of greenish blue patina on them, and they come stock with 2 rivets. They're thin, they're high profile, and they demand a little bit more attention, I would say, like we were talking about before. They're kind of wavy and complex, and they demand a little bit more exploration to kind of find the sound that you like within them. And then I have all my tributes. I have the Billy Higgins tribute. I have the Marcus Gilmore tribute, which is the crazy wavy cymbal that has all the big clusters on it. I made a Kenny Clark Magic Ride tribute, which is a heavy 17-inch cymbal that's kind of modeled after the one he used before it got stolen in the 60s.
That's awesome.
And there's other tributes too. The Howard Curtis tribute ride. I've made a lot of other tributes that I kind of didn't really know if they were something that somebody would want to order regularly, so I didn't keep them on the pre-order site. But I made an Art Taylor. The Brian Blade tribute is one that I'm pretty proud of, something that I've recently made. And that one, that one is a pretty crazy build. It's something that Dave Collingwood talked about, kind of building a cymbal almost entirely from the top surface. So you're never, when you're building a cymbal, it's tough to really think about it as top and bottom, because when you're making a cymbal, you're more thinking about how it affects the surface and the sound and the shape when you're hammering into a curve or onto a curve or into a curve, whether you have the cymbal flipped inside out or not, because the top and bottom, quote unquote, differs within that. So that cymbal was built almost entirely from the top, which gives it that gongy kind of tight umbrella profile that a lot of Brian Blade cymbals have, but it still has that crashability when you really open it up. So that's one that I'm definitely going to be making a lot more of. And then I have the traditional and vintage lines, which they don't really have anything. Those are kind of like old Ks. Like the traditional is just kind of using various methods to build up a cymbal, and then I lathe it. And sometimes I'll do like overhammering, or I'll do a complex thing with clusters. I'll do a thin ride or a medium or whatever. Just kind of, I just make a cymbal when it comes to those ones. And the vintage line, like you have, is kind of approaching the sounds of what I imagine kind of signifies what an old K would be. And a lot of people think about old Ks in sense of having one specific sound, like that kind of trashy, high profile, thin kind of sound. But they're obviously not a line of cymbals. It's just, there's more variety to old Ks than there are in basically every cymbal line that exists nowadays. So it's that same kind of thing where I'm just building a cymbal in the traditional way. And then once I get it to a shape where I pick it up and look at it and it kind of looks the way I want it to. Something that I talked about in a video that I made for Dave Collingwood's Patreon, which is my approach to making these vintage style cymbals. I think a lot of people, especially the bigger companies, when they make these styles of old cymbals that some of them do, they kind of miss the mark because they're approaching it from a way that they're trying to create perfection and this kind of perfect sonic quality in a cymbal or a type of cymbal that is characterized by its imperfections. Like you're talking about before, we love these cymbals that have these kind of crazy overtones and these weird kind of pits and peaks and valleys, and that they're interesting to play. So when I make a vintage series cymbal, there's a rule that I have that is don't play it, don't weigh it. So I make the cymbal, I hammer it up, I lathe it. Sometimes I'll do the patina and the rivets beforehand or after whatever I'm feeling at the time. But until I've told myself and realized in my mind that the cymbal is finished, then I play it and I weigh it just to see what happens. And I think that's a good way to end up with that sort of quality of sound that's not 100% perfect, but you have to play around with it and kind of find out where it works for you. Because I've been there. There's certain things, especially when you're doing commissions, you have to weigh it because the customer wants something specific. You have to kind of test it along the way to make sure you're getting that sonic quality without overworking it. So it doesn't work with every kind of cymbal, but with those specifically, I found it really benefits me to just let go, make a cymbal, hand it off to the next guy, which is also me, kind of how they did at the old factory. And you end up with something that's really interesting, kind of like your cymbal. That's one of the cymbals that was made like that. I just hammered it up, lathed it, and then when it was finished, I tapped on it, and what it was what it is.
Yeah, man. So when I heard that cymbal online, I was like, oh man. Last thing I need is another hole, like the symbol, like a hole in my head, right? So. But then I saw Quincy comment on it, and I was like, "Oh, okay, like it's." I think I need that one. I think I need it, and I'm glad it worked out. And it's super cool to know that it was produced in a way that was kind of like that, where it was, the old Ks were made in a factory. I'm assuming that they probably weren't drummers that were making them, and they were just, making a cymbal on a Thursday, and they got done with it and they handed it off, and it was either stamped medium or heavy. I actually had an old K that was stamped thin once.
That's cool.
Which it was rare. It was such a weird symbol because it was one of the last old Ks I think produced at the factory. A number of years there was this guy named Al Mercury who had a collection of old Ks. And he had like 3 or 4 that he played, and then he just stockpiled everything. And they got released into the wild at one point, and they were being sold on eBay, right? Yeah. And I found this. It was a new old stock old K. And I mean, I literally was probably the second person to ever play it. There were no stick marks on it. There was no patina. It was a brand new cymbal out of this guy's collection. And I mean, he had a little number on it. I think it was like number 104 or something. And I kept it for a little while. It was an interesting cymbal. I just really wanted to, for me, I wanted to hear what it was like. And it was great, a great size, had an umbrella profile, and it was a really, really, really nice cymbal. But it was actually kind of funny because in my mind, it actually sounded too new. Like, obviously the metal had rested, but it was one of like I said, it was one of the last old Ks probably to come out of the factory in 1977.
Wow.
And it was weird. It was neat to see that. But going back to like just how they were making them, because like they didn't really care. So they were all, that was my thin cymbal, but all the other ones are always stamped medium or heavy, and they have their imperfections. They're maybe not, the bell isn't maybe in the center, and
that's what I love about the hand formed bells is you can really kind of mimic those weird kind of shapes, and when they made the blanks, and when they stamped the bells into the blanks, they would heat them up and stack 2 or 3 or 4 at a time, and somebody would just whack it with a big sledgehammer. So the first blank on top would have this big old bell, and then the one at the bottom would have the energy, I guess, would transfer, and it would end up with this little tiny shallow little cup. So it's really cool how the process of making them ends up with these really varied results. And one thing that was interesting too, I think it was Paul Francis that was talking about it on some podcast somewhere. I don't remember what it was, but he's done so many of them. But he was talking about the fact that when the Sabian factory first opened in the late 70s or early 80s, I guess, they brought over some of those guys from the Turkish Zildjian factory to train the Sabian guys. And apparently those guys were convinced that the only proper way to make a cymbal was an orchestral cymbal. Like that was the real way to do it. Those were real cymbals, all, these kind of jazz cymbals, which made me kind of think about maybe their mindset. Orchestral cymbals are usually really low profile and kind of a lot heavier, and they're different from what you would expect a jazz cymbal to be. So all these really sought after old Ks from that factory that were really high profile and thin and stuff like that, I would imagine those old masters at that factory would look at these cymbals that we love nowadays and be like, you messed it up, and look how high the profile is. It's terrible.
So it's funny, those are the cymbals that Elvin would get. He always he would pick the orchestral cymbals.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
That a lot of times when he would, I guess that was what that was the rumor at least, but he would go into the factory and he would generally pick the orchestral cymbals, and that's how.
No way.
How they came.
Yeah, that's interesting because his cymbals usually had a decently high profile as well.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Man.
Really crazy to know, right? And and actually, I think that's how the K-Con line ended up in the jazz line too, if I remember correctly. I remember Paul was talking to me, we did a podcast together, and he I think that we were talking about the high bell cymbals, and the K-Cons actually came, just the original K-Cons came as orchestral cymbals first, and then they turned into jazz cymbals. Yeah, it's interesting how that even that process started back then, and it still continued in the cymbal making up until probably fairly recently with the K-Cons, even with the Zildjian.
Yeah.
So, and actually, even the Sabian factory, I have a really early Sabian cymbal. It's a flat ride that's still really thick and pretty heavy, but it's a great cymbal. I really like that one.
Yeah.
Those original Sabians are I don't know if you've ever played one, but they're actually really nice cymbals too.
I don't think I have. I've played a couple of Canadian Ks. I don't know if those are the ones that you're talking about.
So similar. They're very similar. The Canadian Ks are Zildjians, right? But the original Sabian cymbals were the HHs, which were essentially Canadian Ks, just with the Sabian stamp on it after everybody.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had the pleasure of playing some of those.
They're not expensive. I highly recommend just going on eBay and checking them out.
Okay.
They're thicker, and they some of them can sound really great. I think that's when they came up with the mini cup ride. I think they call it the mini cup, and then they've got all the old HHs. You'll know it because the ink on them is really it's an old style Sabian ink. So they're really killing. So awesome, man. Hey, so do you have, speaking of all the cymbals that you've made, do you have one in particular that stands out as your favorite besides mine?
That's a tough one. The one that usually comes to mind, there's a drummer here locally who's a friend of mine. I used to work at A&F Drums in shipping over there because they're local, and they hired a guy to do some part-time accounting for them. His name is Danny Piro, and he's a super awesome guy, amazing drummer. I think he's mentioned that he takes lessons from Steve Lyman. So to give you an insight into kind of his style of playing, it's that kind of methodical, really kind of crisp sound. But he's an awesome guy. He's got a full set of cymbals for me. And the first 22 that I made for him was kind of the first cymbal that I think flipped me over into, there was something that I learned that cymbal was kind of the overturning into the kind of new style and the kind of more crisp sound that I was able to get. As you do something repeatedly, you're hopefully you're gonna get better at it. I think maybe I've gotten a little bit better, but but who knows? So he has a 22 inch. It's a traditional control ride, and that's the control is the one that I call where it has that Bill Stewart ring on the edge, on the underneath of unlathed, and that one just has this. It had that perfect balance of warmth and smoke and ping, and just like the pitch was really even no matter where you play it. Like there was something about that cymbal that was really nice. So I think Danny P's cymbal is probably one of my favorites that I've ever made. And I have one here too that for some reason hasn't sold. I'm not sure, because it's always interesting being in this scenario where sometimes the cymbals that you make, you kind of tap on them, you're like, yeah, that's cool. I like that one. That's pretty cool. And those ones sell really quickly. And then the ones that you love that you're like, wow, this is gonna sell immediately. Like you still have them a couple months later. And that would be this one here, which is just a traditional thin ride with 3 rivets. It's a 22 inch and it's 2,042 grams. I don't know if it'll work on Zoom if I give it a tap, but I can
How
always
to enable original sound, or
Oh yeah, let me see.
if you do,
For
we should
now.
be here.
How do I do that? More. Yeah, enable original sound. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's give it a tap. With this one, similar to that Danny P cymbal, this one has that warmth and that balance to it, which I really like. But it's about 200 or 300 grams lighter. So I'll see if I can get. So it's kind of low pitched and mean, but it also has a little bit of that sweetness up top.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Might
not have it that long actually.
That was one of my favorites that I've made as well, and I recently made one very similar to that without rivets that sold fairly quickly, and it had that same kind of thing, but it was a little bit less on the low side and a little bit more of that zing up top. So it was the same cymbal, but kind of pushed in a little bit of the opposite direction. So it's I tend to really like those thin kind of high profile cymbals that are really washy, but they also have control when you need it to be. And that Brian Blade tribute that I talked about as well is one that's one of my favorites.
So I know you got to see Brian Blade fairly recently, a little while ago.
Yes.
Did you get to show him any of your cymbals at all? Or?
I didn't. No, I don't. I don't know. Maybe it's a flaw in my business plan, but I don't feel like bothering those guys who have all the cymbals. Maybe one day, maybe one day if they come back and I get to go see them. Same thing with Kenny Washington. I saw Bill Charlap Trio, which is like one of my favorite bands ever, at the same place at Jazz Texas. And they were just incredible, but I didn't bring any cymbals, and people were like, "Man, did you get Kenny Washington to play your cymbals?" And I was like, "No, I'm not. I'm there for the music, and I'm there to show them my appreciation for what they do. But maybe sometime." The good thing about going to see Brian Blade was that he said he's such a nice guy. That we were just talking afterwards, and I told him that I'm a cymbalsmith, and if I could, check out his setup while I was there, so he let me come up on stage and check him out, and he gave me one of his sticks so I could tap on it, and that stuck in my brain until I made that Brian Blade tribute, which was a tribute to his main 22-inch, Spizzichino, and it was heavier and stiffer than I ever imagined it being. It's partially his touch. He uses the bolero stick too, which kind of brings the cymbal, it relaxes the cymbal down a little bit. And so that cymbal was something that I kept in the back of my mind, and I kind of stewed on it and brainstormed at how I could create the cymbal like that. And I think it worked out. I think it worked out pretty well.
That's killing.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, just because I know some of these guys a little bit, you know, you can certainly bring them cymbals and have them check it out because they're nerds, man. Like they're just like us, you know, where you know,
I get that. Yeah, I get that sense
yeah.
too. They'd probably be interested to check them out, but I'm
And you know
nervous.
what? A really cool thing about this is getting to talk to you, right? Like I had a comment on my video, like unfortunately the views haven't been that great, but I had a comment on my video where somebody was asking me what line my cymbal was. And I said, reach out to Manny, you know, like you can just talk to him about what you want and I'm sure he's got it, you know, or he can make it for you, you know. And when I was a kid thinking about talking to the person that made my cymbals, that was never a possibility, you know. It just wasn't there. I remember I got to meet Sabian did a big thing in 2005 where they went around and they did like the factory tour I forget what it was called, but it was the Sabian tour.
Meet the Masters? Meet the Masters tour?
It wasn't that one. It was the Vaults tour is what it was.
Okay, yeah.
Or Meet the Masters. It was the first one that they did, and they went around to all these different drum shops all across the country, and you got to meet Mark Glove and everybody that was there, and you could make a cymbal. They would make a cymbal up to I think like 18 inches there or something. They brought a lathe with them, and they were doing some cool stuff. And I thought, man, that is the neatest thing, just being able to get to meet these people. And I actually got my Sabian endorsement from doing that a long time ago. And I met Chris Stanke, the artist rep, which was really killing, and it was a lot of fun. And you know, I actually got to go to the Sabian factory too. Which have you ever been there?
I haven't. No, I've never been to any big cymbal factory, or I've never been to any cymbal factory. Just my own.
You should go. It's fun.
I really have to, yeah.
They might not let you in anymore, but
yeah. Especially being Canadian, it bothers me that I've never been there.
Yeah, I was actually on tour. I was on a tour up in Canada, and I was playing a festival up there. That it was like a harvest festival, and it was only about 25 miles from the factory. So I set up a little tour and got to go and kind of meet everybody and check out their cymbal making process and all that, which was just really insane. What blew me away about it was, even though this is a huge company, it was still in like 3 or 4 buildings, like beautiful farm buildings almost, like on a river in the middle of nowhere. You know, it's just like, it was super cool. So
yeah, that was where the Zildjian family used to go hunting.
Yeah,
in that area, and they're like, hey, you know what this beautiful landscape needs? A factory.
A cymbal factory. Yeah. Perfect. It's amazing.
Well, that's awesome.
Well, awesome, man. Do you have anything else that you wanted to talk about with your cymbals, or is there anything that we missed topic-wise?
I'm not sure. I think there's we covered a lot of stuff based on what you said before about people getting in contact with me.
I was going to say, how do people do it?
Yeah, there you can send me an email through my website, skretasfamilycymbals.com. The easiest way is usually Instagram. That's what I check the most. It's at skretasfamilycymbals. We just started a Facebook page. My phone number's on the website, so you can send me a text or I usually discourage people from just calling me because we live in 2024 and everybody gets so many spam phone calls every day. So I usually, if I don't recognize the number, I'm usually not answering my phone, sadly. But if you call me and you leave me a message, or that's my cell, so you can text me and say, hey, can I give you a call? This is whoever from wherever, and I want to talk cymbals. That's the beauty about social media too, because you would only ever hear about these factories in the past from your drum store, and you couldn't really do custom orders. Were kind of a pain to do, but nowadays it's kind of the opposite, where people can get in contact with me, and I love talking about cymbals so much that they're like, it's the opposite. I'm like, hey, you want to talk about cymbals? They're like, I'm good for now. We've been talking for an hour. Let me. So it's a nice flip of the dynamic where you can talk to me as long as you like. I do this full time. I'm kind of just usually at the house working away or doing whatever. So if you want to text me or message me and set up a call to talk about exactly what you need, I love it. That's what I do it for.
That's so awesome. And all those links are going to be down below in the description here too. So yeah, we'll be able to get you hooked up there. Man, I guess I have one final question for you.
Yeah.
It's a controversial question. Are any of your cymbals heat treated?
Heat treated?
Oh, I guess you haven't seen Tim's latest video.
You know what's funny? Is that the one that's called Well, This Cymbal Mod Didn't Go As Planned?
Yep.
There
it is. All right.
Just about to watch it. I just got back from the vacation, so I haven't had time to check it out yet.
All
but
right.
I'm watching that right now. And no, I don't have a blowtorch. I don't have anything like that. I don't heat treat. I don't heat treat anything. It's just hammered and lathed, and sometimes with patina, and that's that.
Fantastic. The people wanted
But
to
I guess
know.
I'll find out.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here, and
No,
I
thank you,
look
man.
forward to playing more
Thank
of
you
your
so much.
cymbals in the future too.
Yes, absolutely. Anything you need from me anytime, just give me a call. You know where to find me. Thanks so much for playing that cymbal and wanting to talk to me on your podcast. I've followed you a long time, and this is really cool for me to get to sit here and chat with you. So hopefully we get to do it again. And anything you need, cymbal wise, anytime, just let me know, man.
Thanks so much. Likewise, I'm super excited. All right, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you, man. Talk
All
soon.
right. Bye.